Welcome to This Explainer. You know, every single day, most of us wake up and voluntarily do a whole bunch of things that are, literally, measurably, shrinking our brain tissue. Crazy, right? This isn't some metaphor for just being distracted, and trust me, it's definitely not your generic lifestyle lecture. What we're doing today is opening up a full-blown forensic investigation into the daily routines that are physically destroying your brain's structure. I really want you to view this explainer as a true brain autopsy. We're going to walk through 5 everyday habits that are completely sabotaging you cognitively. And honestly, the most uncomfortable truth here, for pretty much all of us, this damage is entirely voluntary.
All right, let's just dive right into this somewhat dark reality. Think about the stark contrast between a healthy, thriving mind and one that is visibly shriveling up on medical scans. On one side, you've got thick, vibrant, healthy brain tissue. But on the other, it's gray, it's atrophied. We're looking at actual quantified neuroscience here. These are real structural changes thinning out the exact same regions you use every single day to think, to remember, and to regulate your emotions.
So, habit number 1, the sleep debt. Our autopsy has to begin with the absolute most destructive cause of tissue death, which is chronic sleep restriction. We so often treat sleep like a luxury we can just negotiate with, but structurally, the sleep debt is a massive neurological hazard that begins damaging your brain almost immediately.
Now, what's incredibly fascinating here is the physiological flush. When you sleep, your brain actually activates something called the glymphatic system. Think of this like your brain's very own deep cleaning cycle. See, during the day, your brain produces metabolic waste, including this very specific protein called amyloid beta. And guess what? That happens to be the exact same protein primarily associated with Alzheimer's disease. When you skip sleep, you're not just waking up feeling a little groggy. You are actively skipping that crucial flush. So dangerous waste, like that amyloid beta, it just stays there, and it builds up.
Let's actually look at the numbers for a second, because they're wild. Just one single bad night, being awake for 17 to 19 hours, leaves you with the cognitive impairment of someone who is legally drunk. Seriously. But the long-term cost? That's what actually changes your anatomy. This constant buildup of metabolic waste leads to permanent structural damage. You're effectively drowning your hippocampus in its own trash, which literally causes your brain's memory center to visibly shrink on scans. No way around it.
Moving on to habit number 2, the cortisol flood. Let's see how this damage actually compounds. The second major culprit in our investigation is the structural remodeling caused by chronic, unexamined stress.
Evolutionarily speaking, cortisol is an absolutely incredible survival tool. It's meant for these short, intense bursts, like, running away from a physical predator. But when your cortisol stays elevated just because of a passive-aggressive email from your boss or some ongoing financial anxiety, it starts physically remodeling your brain architecture. High-authority data actually shows us that chronic cortisol exposure causes the prefrontal cortex, that's the area responsible for your impulse control and planning, to visibly shrivel. And at the exact same time, it shrinks the hippocampus. So the really crucial point here is that you aren't just feeling stressed out. You are literally soaking your brain in a chemical that actively dissolves the exact problem-solving structures you desperately need to fix the issues causing your stress in the first place.
Habit number 3. The sugar spike. Our third piece of evidence shifts gears a bit from stress to diet. Look, it's no secret that a bad diet affects your body, right? But high sugar consumption, specifically high fructose corn syrup, triggers some really severe neuroinflammation right inside your brain.
And when that neural inflammation hits, it destroys something completely vital. Your brain naturally produces a protein called BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Basically, just think of BDNF as high-grade fertilizer for your neurons. It is absolutely essential if you want to grow new neural connections and strengthen the ones you already have. Well, science-backed studies show us that this sugar-induced inflammation completely suppresses the production of that vital fertilizer. It essentially destroys your brain's synaptic plasticity.
Which leads us to this incredibly profound, kind of troubling realization. You are feeding your body, but starving your mind at the exact same time. Because you suppressed that essential brain fertilizer, the physical real-world result is that it becomes measurably harder to learn, way harder to adapt, and you become noticeably slower at processing information.
All right, habit number 4, the 6-hour sit. This one reveals something so many of us do all day at the office, and it challenges a massive misconception. We almost always think of sitting as purely a physical body problem, right? Like a posture issue or maybe a cardiovascular risk, but actually, it's a critical brain problem, directly tied to a lack of physical movement. There was this really fascinating study out of UCLA, and it found that remaining motionless for 6 hours or more a day causes measurable thinning in the medial temporal lobe.
Now that's the specific region of your brain responsible for forming brand new memories. If you thin it out, you literally stop encoding your own life properly. And hey, remember that BDNF brain fertilizer we were just talking about? Your body produces it primarily through physical movement. So by sitting still for 6 hours, you are effectively turning off the growth signals your brain desperately requires just to maintain its normal thickness. Finally, we hit habit number 5, digital outsourcing. The final phase of our autopsy examines how we are just willingly handing over our brain power and our memory to our phones, usually under this super convincing guise of efficiency. We are seeing this massive, widespread phenomenon right now known as popcorn brain. This is exactly what happens when your mind becomes conditioned to constant 15-second stimulation from screens. It fundamentally recalibrates your baseline dopamine threshold to the point where deep, focused thought doesn't just feel difficult anymore, it feels physically uncomfortable. But as damaging as that digital addiction is, our reliance on specific everyday apps like GPS navigation does even more profound structural damage.
Consider this for a second because it's incredible. Research shows that drivers who actively memorize complex routes, like those famous London taxi drivers, they actually grow their gray matter through spatial reasoning. Meanwhile, our near-exclusive reliance on screens and navigation apps means we're getting increasingly dependent on a device, calling it efficiency, all while the actual hardware inside our skulls is literally atrophying simply from disuse.
Now, I totally get it. This autopsy sounds incredibly grim. We've talked about shriveling, shrinking, and thinning tissue for the last few minutes. But science provides a really powerful silver lining here, and that is neuroplasticity. Your brain is plastic. The hippocampus, it can actually grow back. You can absolutely reverse the thinning. But here is the catch. Because the brain is the only organ in your body that has to fix itself using itself, it requires you to take direct, actionable steps to stop the decay today. First off, you have to make the voluntary choice to just stop the damage. Second, you've got to break that digital dopamine loop, maybe try putting the phone in another room tonight. And third, prioritize your sleep to protect that essential glymphatic cleaning cycle. You have the power to turn those growth signals back on. You really do.
As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought, and really a challenge. You have the forensic evidence now. The neuroscience has been quantified. You've seen exactly what is happening under the hood of your own mind. So the question is, which of these 5 habits are you going to cut out first? What will you change to start rebuilding your brain tonight?